It's my pleasure today to talk to Randy Denmon. We talked to Randy over 3 years ago when he and a friend of his, Dean Lewis, decided to try and drive a Tesla Model S from the United States to the Panama Canal. And as a result of that little adventure, he wrote a book called Off the Grid. And we want to talk to him about that book and what inspired him to write it. So, Randy, hi. It was good to see you again.
Good morning, Bill. I'm glad you have me on. The book has been out just over a week right now.
Oh, well, that's perfect timing then. Excellent. All right. Well, look, let's just briefly recap for everybody. Back in February of 2014, I got some emails from a friend of yours saying, hey, I got this friend who his buddy is driving, trying to go to the Panama Canal in a Tesla Model S. I think it'd be a great story to interview. So somewhere in, I think it was Guatemala or someplace, I caught up with you. So we did that interview, and then we did a subsequent interview when you, in fact, did actually finally successfully reach the Panama Canal. So let's pick up the thread. So what's happened since then with you?
The book came from just how many adventures we had along the way. It was much more difficult to make that trip than I could ever imagine. And subsequent to that, I also drove my Tesla from Texas to Dead Horse, Alaska, which is a couple of 100 miles north of the Arctic Circle. So I have driven it every bit of the Pan American Highway from Alaska to Panama where the road ends.
Right.
It does pick back up in South America, but you can't drive it. So I've driven every mile of it in a Tesla, and that can be a somewhat challenging trip, to say the least. And you really can't lose your sense of humor on something like this, or you won't make it very far because there's a lot of road blocks. And when I got through, I just started jotting down some of the stories, and it turned out to be a really kind of entertaining and adventuresome tale.
Well, and I, of course, interviewed you during the trip and then did a debrief once you got down to the Panama Canal. So you're telling me then that you then took it and drove it, what, to Alaska?
Correct. About 5,000 miles from Texas to Alaska.
Wow. So you've put quite a few miles on that car then.
It's got a few dings on
I
it.
am guessing that between the trip south of the border and north of the border, which was the more daunting for you?
Oh, certainly the one south of the border. And just due to, those are all third world countries. They're somewhat dangerous. When you drive to Alaska, you just have to deal with the vast space. You don't really have any danger. Everybody speaks English. You're going through first world countries. So certainly the trip south. And the book only encompasses the trip from Texas to Panama.
Right.
And I don't know, I think I mentioned this in the book, and when I interviewed you initially, we had departed really just a week after two people drove coast to coast in a Tesla. I think they drove from San Francisco to New York, and they garnered some significant headlines nationwide, and we were just kind of like, well, that's not much of a trip. Let's see if we can do a real trip.
Right.
So we slipped south of the border and really didn't have an itinerary other than just keep going south.
Yeah. So, you know what, in reading the book, I gathered there's really two elements to this thing that were challenges for you. Number one, of course, was the continual threat. You're driving here a brand new state-of-the-art, at that point, and still pretty much state-of-the-art electric car. You tried to apparently camouflage it somewhat with some paint so it wouldn't look so new and tempting. But the other part of this thing was just simply the challenge of finding places to plug the thing in at night.
Very difficult. We were aided a little bit in the fact that in the third world countries in Central America, a lot of people still use air conditioners and appliances that are 240 volt. In the United States, window units and all have gone to 110. They've gotten much more efficient. And that was one way we charged up, is just kind of try to find some window units down there.
Right.
They're 240 power now. We blew a lot of breakers between here and Panama. I would find a 20 amp breaker, but they would blow at 10, 15 amps.
Yeah.
So it resulted in sleepless nights, perpetually having to get up and make sure your electricity you hadn't blown the fuse during the night.
Yeah, because the strategy basically was the car's got about 260 some mile range, something like that, depending on obviously whether you're climbing steep mountain passes in Mexico or Guatemala. But then so you would try to make the most that day, reach a destination in the evening, find a hotel, motel, whatever, and then of course charge up overnight and then be ready to go first thing the next morning.
And we were somewhat aided by the fact that, the roads down there, you may average 20 to 30 miles an hour when you're lucky, and that really increases Tesla 85 kilowatt hour range. At 30 miles an hour to go about 400 miles.
Oh, okay.
It's really a function of the speed. Now, we never went more than 200 miles a day. I mean, at 25 miles an hour, that's 10
That's
hours.
still a 10-hour day, yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of 10, 12-hour days on the road where you'd only go 200 miles. And even in Central America, they don't have any bypasses around the towns. The little towns, you motor down Main Street after Main Street, and there's no telling what's in your way. I mean, getting stuck in a traffic jam or just stopping for cows or goats, whatever.
Yeah.
Add these 15 or 20-minute delays all day long. And crossing the borders was a very difficult task to get that car. These border crossings, I think we had 7 or 8 of them. You might spend all morning at a border crossing just filling out paperwork to get the car across. And I think I talked about this in the book a little bit. The standard customs international sheets, they require a VIN number and a motor number. And we didn't have a motor number.
Right.
So that really perplexed the bureaucrats, what to do when they couldn't fill in that second block. So, you just kind of have to beg, plead, maybe bribe, whatever it takes.
Literally open the hood and show them, look, no motor.
That opened up eyes a lot.
Yeah.
So that got us out of some jams where we just show them we didn't have a motor.
So what was the experience like writing a book for a year? Basically, as I understand it, Randy, you're an engineer. You've got a service company that provides I think mechanical engineering services and things to the oil and gas industry.
Civil engineering.
Civil engineering. Okay.
But I am a novelist, Bill. I've written 4 novels. So
oh, okay.
I had some history in book writing. But I had never, I'd always written fiction. I had never entertained nonfiction, but it came pretty easy. Really, all you have to do is kind of tell the story.
Right. And you did I think you did a remarkable job there. I sensed like I was riding around, riding along with you, reading the book, that it was, probably long periods of boredom punctuated by periods of deep anxiety.
It was, 10 hours a day in a car. There were no weekends other than the 2 or 3 times we got stranded. But, you're looking at 10, 12 hours a day in the car and then charging all night. It was, I think I lost 6 to 8 pounds on the trip.
Yeah.
Just due to the anxiety and long hours.
So you didn't do, I sense that you did some planning. You sort of, we're going to follow this route. We don't know if it's a good road or bad road, if it's out of the way or, a shortcut. Certainly weren't sure where you're going to find power.
No, I did plan in detail somewhat my first trip across the Mexican border. The northern couple hundred miles of the Mexican border is very dangerous. It's one of the most dangerous places in the world for kidnapping and carjacking. So I did some detailed research on how to get through there. But from there, we just kind of asked people where the best road was, where we might get a charge. So once we got into Mexico, we really didn't have a plan. It was kind of developed as we went along. And you didn't really know, there's a couple of times we didn't get a full charge quite often, so we couldn't go anywhere but maybe down the road to the next town where we could sort of find a charge.
Which country did you find the most appealing, and which country did you find the most challenging?
Well, Nicaragua is a really neat country. They were very friendly to us. We were really helped by the natives everywhere we went along. They I think I mentioned this in the book, that when we got to Managua, Nicaragua, the local English-speaking newspaper did a little story on it. Yeah, and the hotel kind of pitched in and got us a charge, and it was just amazing how the natives kind of took us in. Now, I didn't really like northern Mexico and Honduras. Honduras is I think it's the murder capital of the world, and I did have a brush there where, they fleeced or robbed us from $400 or $500, and I was a little concerned at that time they might take the car or make it worse. So Honduras was a very difficult, dangerous country to cross.
Well, it seemed like you were being extorted every time you hit a border. You were being extorted for one thing or another.
Bribery is the key down there.
Yeah, and I was curious. I mean, that you kept doling out these dollars or whatever currency you were using at the time. Did you guys have like a secret stash somewhere, or were you able to go to an ATM and pull off more cash?
Well, I kind of knew from my time in Central America, you don't keep too much cash with you, because to the bad instance, they're going to take it all.
Right.
But I did keep $200 in my sock.
Right.
Keep a couple $100 on me, and the time I got robbed, I had to pull out the last $200 just for fear. But no, we'd go to the bank machines periodically and get some cash. When you run into these border guards or just anybody that you need some help from, that's kind of the culture in the area. Is they call it kind of a hidden tax.
Right. Right.
And it's good to have a little money.
Yeah. Now, your compatriot in this journey was Dean Lewis. How did in reading this, I was struck like you were a couple of an old married couple feuding a lot of the time. He liked to sing and play music you didn't want to listen to and things like that. So how did that relationship end?
Yeah, we're really good friends. If you spend a month with anybody, 24 hours a day, there's certainly going to be some friction. When we finally got home and booked our plane rides home, that was key. I told the ticket agent, I said, "Do not sit us together. Put me in the back of the plane and him in the front of the plane."
In the front of the plane, yeah.
After a month, you sleep in the same room, you ride in the same car. It can. But we kept our spirits up the whole way.
Yeah. Cool. High point of the trip for you?
Just making it.
Making it.
Just making it. It was actually in doubt the entire way. We couldn't have the drivers down there are Central America has some of the highest car accident rates. You could have a wreck anytime. They just drive on all sides of the road. A stop sign is just a mere suggestion instead of. So, it was just always in doubt. Even, even when we got to Panama, when we still had 2 or 3 days left to go across really just the jungle there, but it was just always in doubt till the day we got there. So, I guess finally making it and saying, "Whoa, we did."
Yeah. So how many antacids did you consume on the trip?
How many what?
How many antacids did you consume on the trip?
Quite a few.
Yeah,
It's you know, when you're traveling out in some of these rural areas and the cops swoop in on you, which they do quite frequently, and you
yeah,
never know whether that can be very unsettling. You know, when you're just out in the middle of nowhere and the Central American cops swoop in to just, you know, check you out.
yeah.
You can have 5 or 6 minutes, you know, just wondering, you know, is this just a cop stop or
Or is this a phony cop stop? And they're going,
that's
yeah,
right.
exactly. Well, I noticed in reading the postscript in the book that not long after you got back, there's a couple of guys who were attempting to drive motorcycles down through Central America, Americans, and they've disappeared.
Oh yeah, there were two. It wasn't after we got back. While we were going, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was actually the week we passed through Mexico. One was a guy, Harry Devitt from New York. He was trying to drive a motorcycle down to Brazil to see the World Cup, and the drug cartels got him. They think they found his body, and another individual, James Stacy, was driving back, really on the same route, really close to where we went down. Uh, and he came up missing. And I think the drug cartels got him too. It's been no word of him in
Yeah,
the 2 to 3 years since.
yeah.
So,
So, and you know, I think in the book you sort of admit yourself as kind of a Louisiana redneck, some fairly conservative political views. How had that? Did the trip change you in any way that was with that respect?
maybe a little bit. You know, it's and part of the you know the book is we kind of have to, you know, we kind of play ourselves as a couple of bumbling EV enthusiasts stumbling our way through, which is, you know, really what we did after, you know, the first 100 miles that we had
Well,
planned.
neither of you speak Spanish, right? I mean, a few words.
I speak a little Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I lived in Mexico at one time a decade ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't speak fluent Spanish by any means. No, it was an experience I'll remember forever. Just, you know, the fact that we actually pulled it off.
Right.
It
So,
was
so politically though, you what moderate a little bit. You think because in reading the initial part of the book, you were complaining about all these strictures and things that you as a business have to put up with. And I sense that that sort of changed as you went along. That well, maybe there's a place for that after experiencing what we've experienced.
Yeah, you know, I'm really a moderate. You know, I've probably voted Democrat and Republican an equal amount of times in my life.
Okay.
So I would be, you know, just middle America,
Yeah.
not on either extremes. But yeah, when you get down in these areas where you can just see you know, how poor they are, you know, how they don't really have government structure. Uh, you know, we have the rule of law in America. A lot of these places we travel through, they don't have the rule of law.
Yeah.
And you can see really the results of that every day, and you come to appreciate what we have in America in that regard.
Yeah. Some of those places that you visited were absolutely beautiful and would make, I gather, terrific places to visit as a tourist. But for the fact that there's so much poverty and I don't know
Yeah.
what was the I gather that that lake with the volcanoes was probably the most attractive place from what you were
Uh,
writing.
Yeah, Lake Adam. That's a really cool place. Now, a lot of Westerners visit there, and they visit a lot of these places, but they just fly into the international airport,
Oh,
and then they fly over there, and you have these little islands in these countries where tourists visit, and you're generally safe in those areas.
yeah,
But getting to them and fro them is complicated if you don't take the tourist route, where you fly in and then you hop on another plane, or you get on a secured bus and you ride out to the tourist site for a week.
yeah. So what's the plan going forward? I assume you still have that. You still have the Model S.
Oh yeah, it's got a few dings on it. You know, I would love to take it to South America and drive the rest of the Pan American Highway. I've done some research in that. The shipping of the vehicle is what's so complicated and cumbersome. not so much just the price of getting it there and back, just the fees and the customs taxes
Right.
you pay. They can, some of these countries, to bring in a vehicle and until you ship it back, your customs fee might be 25% of the value of the vehicle.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a car to South America, you have to at least put a deposit down of maybe 25%. That's so you don't bring it and sell it. So
Right. Exactly.
a lot of international paperwork, but I'm still researching it. Uh, since I went, there have been some EV charging stations pop up in Mexico. They actually have a supercharger in Mexico City
Yeah,
now.
I saw that. I saw the latest map. I said, "Oh my God, Randy should have waited. You could have taken advantage of a bunch of superchargers down through Mexico now."
Yeah, I think there's only one, or maybe actually there may be three or four, and then some of the resorts have them because they are selling Teslas in Mexico. I still don't know if they're selling Teslas in South America anywhere, if there's any charging network. But still
I didn't
outside,
see one on the latest map. I haven't seen any.
yeah, but still outside of Mexico, there would probably be
Yeah.
no EV charging stations. But I mean, when we were going, I got emails, the guys through you and through some of the other media outlets that were covering us. I would have Hondurans, Nicaraguans email me, saying if you need some help, let me know. I can get you a
Right.
charge. And most of these people that email me, they wouldn't be on my direct route.
Right.
But I did have, people that would, even down in Panama, Honduras, Nicaragua, once we started getting, some media attention, start emailing me. If you get
Yeah.
here, I can help you get a charge. And there's EV enthusiasts in those areas where they don't have an electric car in the entire town,
Right.
in the entire country. So, and South America will probably be the last continent, other than Africa, where they start to get. There are a few I did see where Chile has a place that rents Teslas,
Oh,
but
okay.
there's a high end rental car establishment in Chile that will rent you a Tesla for a day or two. But I still haven't seen any distribution or infrastructure for charging for electric cars in Central America.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're going to drive it and you really want to do it right, you need to get in front of the infrastructure.
Well, that's a remarkable trip. So you're gonna look at. You haven't given up the thought of finishing the Pan American Highway. You'd have to ship it. I'm guessing somewhere into Colombia. Since there's no road from through what's that long stretch of south of
Darien,
the Panama Canal?
the Darien Gap.
Yeah.
A couple of 100 miles with no road. So yeah,
Yeah.
you either ship it to Colombia and drive it to Argentina, or vice versa.
Right.
It might be you could sell the car down there, but then you have to pay the tariff.
Right.
But there'd be some cost and not just the shipping, but also the bureaucratic paperwork.
Right.
And
Right.
just to get it home from Panama turned into a major ordeal.
I'm guessing that probably it would be a somewhat safer trip. I mean, it seems like things have calmed down somewhat, at least at least in South America. You don't tend to hear as much, other than what's happening in Venezuela. Things tend to be a little bit quieter there politically than it once was.
No, it'd be significantly safer. Even
Yeah.
Colombia has become a
Yeah.
somewhat safe country
Yeah.
compared to what it was. It'd be significantly safe. It wouldn't be like driving across the Midwest, but it'd be significantly safer than
Right.
Central America and Mexico.
Well, when you get around to doing that, we're going to have to do an interview then. Well, you going to do it in this car, or are you going to trade up to a Model X or something?
No, I'll do it in this car.
Okay.
I did find out, when I went up to Alaska, there's a lot more variables in the wind and the temperature and driving on like muddy gravel roads were variables.
Yeah.
The closest I've still ever come to running out of electricity was up there when I ran into a cold front where the temperature dropped 30 degrees and I ran into like a 40 knot, 30 knot headwind.
Oh, wow.
And I did some research later, but at the time I didn't realize how those two variables really affect the range. But that's still the closest. I mean, it was blinking and telling me to pull over.
So,
And
so far from Alaska to the Panama Canal, you have never had to be towed, never been stranded
never been to,
completely.
never been towed. Like I said, the closest I came, I got down to the display was reading about 6 miles, and that was really due to a cold front and a tremendous headwind that
Right.
I ran into, and I didn't really realize it. I'm just sitting there and I'm just burning electricity faster than I didn't know if something was wrong with the gauge, and then I just get out and it's 38 degrees and the wind's blowing so hard it's almost knocking me over, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Now, was this by yourself?
Now I had somebody with me, but
Oh,
I was in a very rural area, which it was, you know, 100 miles to the nearest civilization, and I just slowed down to about 18, 20 miles an hour and drove the 100 miles. Took 4 or 5 hours.
yeah. So you found what, another air conditioner or what?
I actually found a good 240 EV charger, but it was 100 miles away.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Well, look, congratulations on the book. I hope it will certainly put a. Oh, where can we buy it?
Well, you can buy it anywhere online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It should be in the bookstores.
Okay.
It's published by Skyhorse in New York, and they do a lot of these nonfiction narrative type books. And
Okay. I'll put it up here for everybody to see again.
there it is.
Autograph too. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Bill.
It's been a pleasure. Well, look, keep me posted on things going forward.
I certainly will, Bill. Have a good day.
All righty. Talk to you later.
Okay, you bet.
Bye bye.